Look at these cows across from our hostel. I guess our campsite. We just had the most gorgina breakfast, pale liquor, and now we're gonna cycle into town, into Groningen.
Using gorgina and liquor in a sentence? Iconic.
It's the Dutch way. Gorgina liquor.
I don't know if gorgina is the Dutch way.
It is. I'm calling it. We've spent our entire 20s being best friends.
We survived university together, traveled together,
Moved to a foreign country together, survived long distances apart,
and made it back together during a global pandemic.
all while making each other laugh along the way.
If we've learned one thing in our 20s, it's that having amazing friendships is everything.
And we want to say bon voyage to this decade in an unforgettable way.
So, since we've been besties for the last 10 years,
Over the next 10 months, we're going to try and finish visiting 30 countries before our 30th birthdays. And we couldn't do it without bringing you along. We're going to document the whole process, so grab your bestie and get ready for an amazing adventure. Hi, baby. All right, we just got off our bikes. We biked into town.
bike ride, and it was kind
uphill.
of uphill the whole way.
Last night going home was not uphill. We went a different way. So we got our workout
I was
in.
struggling a little
We
bit,
got
I'll
our
be
workout in.
honest.
We are here at the Groninger Museum. This has been recommended lots of times, so I'm really excited to check it out. And I think there's a couple different exhibits, so let's go.
Yeah, I don't really know what to expect, but I'm excited.
Yeah. So we made our way through the exhibit on the bottom floor first, which included the history of the Groninger Museum itself, and even the crazy story of this stolen Van Gogh painting as told through a comic book strip.
So this one here is talking about lighting. It's really cool in general. This whole museum is kind of like, how do you make a museum? And so this one is all about lighting. So there's like red lighting, and it's like, okay, this has a tone. And then it's like, you take the red, you add green. That has a tone. What if you add an orange? Wow. And it can bring like a totally different look to the painting. So obviously when you make a museum, you need to like take that into consideration.
And it's really interesting, they say in the little speech how like LED lighting was only invented 15 years ago, and we don't think about how the options before that were just fluorescent, and then before that obviously were just gas.
Or with candles.
Yeah, and it really does affect how things look.
It could totally change how you perceive. So when you talk about like, yeah, the curating, the way that that painting looks just by lighting.
This hall is so cool. It's giving 3 different texts and opinions about works of art and showing how much those opinions will change your perception of the art. Even ChatGPT. So interesting. This is an ode to all different museums around the Netherlands and Groningen. Even the Tea Museum. They even have a children's section, which is a whole exhibition dedicated to a better world and what that possibility could look like.
Eventually, we made our way through one of my most favorite sections, this entire city or world or whole universe basically created out of recycled and repurposed cardboard. The details in this exhibit were incredible. So many different styles and ways of expressing through this medium. And at first I wasn't sure exactly how it had all come together or who had created it, but it eventually became more clear that this was a work of art in progress. I lost my light. Eventually it became more clear this was a work of art in progress that was continually being added to by people who visited the museum.
Okay, we just finished at the museum. It was such an amazing museum. Like, such an experience through the whole entire thing.
Yes, I love museums. Like, it's one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do when traveling is go to.
All right, we just finished at the museum. It was such a cool experience.
Yeah.
And like an experience top to bottom walking through the whole thing.
Yeah, I am a museum person, and when I travel, I love to find museums, but I've been to so many museums now. I kind of try to look for something different than just like an art museum.
Those general
like a
general
basic
museums.
kind of history museum, though those are nice sometimes. I've just been to a lot, and I love finding like unique kind of cool niche museums, and this definitely checked a lot of boxes, and it's going to be in my top 5, maybe even my top 3 favorite museums I've ever been to.
I agree. It was such a good experience and so well curated.
And so it was divided into 2 sections. One is kind of the history of this museum specifically, but they really did it through a lens of just museums and kind of like what is museum curation like. And it really gave a great perspective of actually how much influence a museum and the way that they curate it has on how we experience the work and art in there. Like almost like the art of museum curation.
And how that's changed throughout history and how different times in society has changed that and stuff. It was very interesting.
And it just like, I think gave me a new perspective that now when I go to other museums, I'm going to be like more aware of like how they've chose to curate it, and maybe even like be able to separate my opinion versus maybe how the museum wants me to experience it.
I totally agree. Everything from the lighting to the frames to how they lay it out to what they choose to include. It's such something you can take. It's like a lens you can take to every museum you go to, which is really cool.
And then the second part was a kids museum, and this was incredible because it was a kids museum geared towards kids, but it was very enjoyable like for adults, and I got a lot out of it. And so they had all these kind of like cool art exhibits that definitely are like childlike, and then what they did is they had a child write the kind of like description of it, and so it was like this very like childlike perspective on these like art for adults that have like a youthful element to it, and they wrote the most beautiful, thoughtful things.
The whole exhibit was called A Better Place, and it was based on these ideas and these sort of iterations and these works of art that depict a better world and a better place in some capacity, whether that's looking to the future or like looking at the tougher parts of our world, and how a kid would even see those things and how a kid would begin to understand those things. But that was really cool to see as an adult as well, to see that like childlike perspective and childlike wonder on some of these like really heavy topics.
Yes, and that idea of like a better world, like kids are the future, like so there were so many layers that like if you brought your kid to it, it was like fun and colorful and playful and interactive, so they would just enjoy it. But like us as an adult, like I got a lot out of it, like the deeper meaning. And then there were moments where it was like totally adult friendly to like do like childlike things. Like we like crawled through this worm for like, it was like, I don't know, like 2-3 minutes, 4 minutes of like crawling through like a completely dark circle. But it's like, when as an adult have you crawled for that long?
Yeah, it's so true.
Because it's dark and no one can see you and you can't see anything, there is also a sense, it feels very like you're allowed to like be playful and imaginative, and it felt without judgment. And even like as an adult going through that, and then I was talking to the guy who was like overseeing it, he said that he didn't really like it, but I kind of had a fun playful time. So it's just even interesting of like an adult approaching like a kid experience was cool.
Yeah, and even as an adult, we would approach that so differently, and all adults would approach that so differently.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really, it put you into your body, put you into your senses, and into the experience in such a cool way.
And it's just a museum that like I had like visceral like feelings from. Like I got feelings, and it like gave like a unique perspective, and I'll just think about it. And I always think about like our very first trip going to the Van Gogh Museum was like such a great example of this. It was
life-changing, yeah.
Yeah, because they like...
1 second.
Oh. So it reminded me of when we were in Amsterdam, like our very first trip, our very first time in Amsterdam, we went to the Van Gogh Museum, and they obviously show Van Gogh's work, but like it was more about Van Gogh as a person, and you followed the like emotional experience of Van Gogh, and like his family was a big part of this museum and curating the museum. So it very much was like an ode to him as a person from his like loving family, which was like so unique. And by the end, we were all standing in the room like crying because the audio guide was so beautiful, and just like how they wrapped it up. And that was my first experience of like, oh, museums can be like emotional and visceral, and they can really like pull something out of you. And this one was definitely more like fun and playful. Like I wasn't necessarily like crying, even though there were moments of like, oh, but it just like
there was a lot of emotion to it. I think it's a really good final point as well, the reflection of this museum versus the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam being about Van Gogh's life experience, and really his personal experience through life. This weirdly had a reflection of that, of like a child's perspective and experience through life, and our experience in society and in museums, and how that's all reflected in our museums and in our art and in our historical artifacts. And it is weirdly parallel now that you're saying that. Yeah.
And this feeling of like, we in the Van Gogh Museum like went through and looked at like what it felt like to be Van Gogh, and like the emotions he went through like throughout his career, and ultimately like at the end of his life, and then how his family like reflects on that. So it like brought you through those emotions, and this really like brought you through like the emotions like of a child like interacting with the world. And it just, I don't know, maybe
it was beautiful.
This is way too deep, but I just like, if you are here, I highly recommend this museum. I think they change out certain exhibits and stuff, but like it was just like a really well curated museum. I would love, if I like lived near here, I would like come back every time it changed. Because it was just so curated, beautifully.
If you find yourself in Groningen, the Groninger Museum, incredible. I totally agree, would highly recommend. Clearly, we took a lot from this.
Yeah.
But it was so fun. It was a blast.
Okay, well, and now we are off to go to a bar to see if we can see a bar that's playing an F1 game.
We are in Europe, so they better be playing F1. Why are we so into
sports now?
We are in Europe, so they better be playing F1. We're officially sport girlies. It all started with Taylor Swift dating Travis. Now we're into F1, and now we're into football because of the Euro Cup. So this has been a journey for us in a different way.
Talk about coming to Europe and becoming a whole new person.
Yeah, it's like, new personality.